Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, we'll have a look ahead to the national political conventions. Donald Trump's choice of Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate. UK political expert Dr. Stephen Voss will join us in just a few minutes. But first, a man with a unique perspective on the challenges facing law enforcement and trust within the African-American community. Former Lexington Police Chief Anthony Beatty. Beatty grew up in Lexington. He then worked the streets in law enforcement and a career that eventually led him to the top job with the Lexington Police Department. Beatty retired from being police chief and became an administrator at the University of Kentucky. He ran for Lexington mayor in 2014. He's a frequent speaker around the country, always though happily returns home where he and his wife Eunice are active in many facets of the community. After the tragedy in Dallas, 5 officers being killed during a protest against police actions in Louisiana and Minnesota, we thought of the perspective that Chief Beatty might bring us, and we're happy to have him come in. And we thank you very much for coming today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bill. We appreciate the opportunity, actually.
Chief, you know the emotions expressed across America over the last couple of weeks. What are your thoughts as the country comes to grips with where we are and how to move forward?
Well, my thoughts are, I think about the families that have been impacted by these tragic situations. The families of the victims and the victims themselves, but also the police officers and their families and their agencies who are involved, and in the bigger picture, their communities, because the interrelationship between police officers and the individuals who have been injured or killed by police officers certainly impact our community at large.
What is going on during a traffic stop when you're a police officer or when you're a driver and you're stopped? How can we be sure in this country that there is respect on both sides of the badge?
Well, it starts though so early in life, Bill. And I often talk about how we train police officers, but you and I come to the table with a preconceived notion or a set of stereotypes, if you will, about people and individuals and situations. And so when a police officer makes that traffic stop, they have all of those preconceived notions and all the things they've learned in life about the person that they're stopping, what they look like, what actions they might anticipate, and all those things are already pre-programmed, and then what actions the police officer have to take to counteract the actions of the individual they stop. And on the other side of the coin, the individual who's being stopped certainly has a set of preconceived notions about the police officers and what they've done and their interaction with the community. And so when we have those interactions between the two individuals, police and the community person, then those stereotypes the tapes start playing about what I've seen. And for that reason, we've had some quick reaction on the part of both police and community folks or citizens that have led to these tragic incidents.
You've been in law enforcement about 40 years.
Right.
Do you see different times call for different ways of handling situations out there on the part of the police and on the part of the community? Oh,
they certainly do, Bill. We see these transitions in our community relations with police and communities, and there are cycles of ways that you have to interact with the citizens that you interact with. And so we see a trend now that's very different from anything we've seen in the past. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have a lot of people working on what the remedy is. How do we get better police-community relations? How do we better understand the plight of the individuals we're stopping, particularly those African Americans? They tend to be African American males. So how do we better understand the culture and the interrelationship of those individuals? And so the trend is a better opportunity for police and law enforcement to have interaction, better training, more hiring, promotions of individuals inside the organizations, so that we get a grip on what's happening in our communities and figure out what has to be done to stop this and create a more positive environment for all.
What can you do to de-escalate a situation, whether it is the traffic stop at the time or whether it is the response within a community afterward when rhetoric and emotions clearly start to cross the line?
Right. Well, let's deal with the traffic stop
Yes.
first, because that seems to be where a lot of these are encountered, not only traffic stops, but the interaction when a police officer approaches someone on the street about some type of activity. So the first thing in that is for the individual who is being confronted by the police officer to be compliant in all facets of that, because the police officer in that case is trying to investigate a crime or investigate the traffic violation. So compliance is critical. So you hear all the traditional kinds of things of hands in plain visible sight, lights on inside the vehicle, license and registration and those things readily available, and listen for the instruction of the police officer. On the other side of the coin, the police officers got to be very observant, very reactive to what they're seeing, very cautious, but at the same time very courteous. So we've got a balancing act that we have to play here between the police officer and the individual they've had either the traffic stop or the investigative stop with.
It's a split-second decision at times whether that officer is going to potentially use deadly force, right?
Very much so, and we all have to think about if we were placed in that situation, how would we react, what would we say, what would we do? And so it's very easy to Monday morning quarterback any of these situations on the part of police or citizens or the suspect or their family. And so you got to think about all these things are happening in milliseconds sometimes. And so you got to make that decision.
How have things changed since you were out there policing the streets? And I remember when you were a candidate to be police chief, we got hold of the records that indicated how many times you had been commended as a police officer, and it was full of notes and commendations from people who very much approved of what you were doing out there on the streets as an officer. To those, what can be learned from your experience?
Yeah. Well, I was very blessed early in my career to have the opportunity to be a part of community services, which was public relations. You got to think about that. That was in the 70s and 80s when police community relations were probably not as good as they are even today. We were coming off the heels of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. We had all these movements happening across the country. Police interactions in the community had been pretty negative. And so when I got involved with community services, it gave me an opportunity to see the other side of the community. And being from the housing projects in the inner city of Lexington gave me an opportunity to see another side of Lexington, so I could blend those two in terms of my working relationship. So I set out on a mission to make sure that I improved the relationship for the police department with the community that I knew, both black and white in all aspects of it. And so that opportunity created the chance for me to meet a lot of folks, have a lot of positive impact in our community on many organizations and boards, and try to move the ball forward in terms of police-community relationships. That was in the 70s and 80s. And we fast forward to today, and we're having the same kinds of issues. So I firmly believe it takes that kind of policing again, back to relationships, back to community-oriented policing, back to working with people hand in hand, being involved other than just being a police officer.
You and your wife have been involved in a lot of activities to build a community while you were as chief and since. And do you think that most people realize the importance of that and that everybody has some responsibility there?
Yeah, well, we firmly believe that if you've been gifted or been blessed by something, then you have to give back. And the only way to make a community better is for everyone to give back in proportion to what they've received. And in that giving, we want to bring someone else along. Eunice and I fully understand that our opportunities were created because someone else cared or someone else gave. And so we want to reach back to those individuals who might not have the opportunity to be successful and create ways for them to do that.
You're now in charge of public safety at the University of Kentucky. The school year is about to begin. The football season is upon us. We're in these times that there are all kinds of concerns. A lot of parents are going to be sending their kids off to school. What are you doing to ensure that everyone will be safe this fall?
Well, obviously, specifically for football, there's a set of protocols we use. Chief Monroe and his staff at police work closely with Lexington Police and all of our law enforcement agency counterparts. But in the bigger picture, given what's going on the national and international scene, the university is fully prepared to deal with and react to situations that pose a public safety threat on a larger scale. And I feel very confident about our ability and certainly about the information that we receive from the FBI task force and all the other intelligence puts us in a position to be better prepared to react. The University of Kentucky, under Dr. Capilouto's leadership and Eric Mundy, they put a lot of resources into facilities and infrastructure and equipment to better equip law enforcement and public safety to be able to react. So the ball's been raised significantly, the bar, excuse me, for University of Kentucky in terms of making the citizens, faculty and staff and visitors safe when they come to our campus.
I mean, since you've been there, this has gotten to be a more serious challenge, hasn't it?
Oh, yes, it has. The emphasis is on academics and student success, but at the same time, how to be safe and then how to react in the aftermath of these situations, whatever it is. And so we're not just talking about terrorist kinds of activities, but we're prepared to react to most crises and manage those in an efficient and effective way, I should say.
Anthony Beatty, I want to thank you for coming by today, the former Lexington Police Chief, now with the University of Kentucky. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Back in just a moment, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Stephen Voss on the upcoming political conventions and the look ahead to the fall races in Kentucky and throughout the land. WKYT's Kentucky News Newsmakers. We'll be right back. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Developments are coming fast now in campaign 2016. The Republican National Convention is set for this coming week, and the Democrats will hold their national convention the next week. Friday, Republican Donald Trump chose Indiana Governor Mike Pence to be his running mate. Earlier in the week, Democrat Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton for the White House, and polls seem to indicate there is quite a fight ahead. In Kentucky, Republican Senator Rand Paul is running for a second term. He faces Democratic Lexington Mayor Jim Gray in November. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is watching every Senate race across the country very closely as he hopes Republicans maintain control of his chamber. Dr. Stephen Voss is one of Kentucky's most often quoted political experts. He teaches political science and researches political behavior at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Voss, welcome. We appreciate you for coming in very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we've talked about this campaign, it seems, for a couple of years, and now the action really rolls. The Republicans start their convention Monday. We now know that there is going to be a GOP ticket, it looks like, of Trump and Pence. What are the pluses and minuses of the choice of the Indiana Governor Mike Pence by Donald Trump?
The Midwest is a core battleground. Republicans have been doing better in that area lately than they had in the more distant past. Having somebody who could represent that area helps Trump out, other things equal. This is a very conservative politician. It helps Trump satisfy the qualms of the Cruz vote, you know, the people who were suspicious of him because he really doesn't have conservative credentials. If he wants to shore up his base, get the conservatives mobilized, this is the kind of guy he needed.
Do you think that was more important to him than to try to widen his base with the choice?
It's pretty clear that this is, you know, tacking to the right, not to the center. You know, it's hard to say why a politician would do that. Those votes in the center are the ones that determine elections, but that center is getting smaller every year. The people on the far left and the far right are getting more numerous every year. It becomes less and less tempting to try to go to the middle and stitch the country together.
Why is that there is no middle in America anymore?
I mean, the voters are now starting to polarize. You know, if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I would have said the politicians have polarized, the voters haven't. But we're even seeing it now among the voters. They're watching the conflict, and they're starting to take sides too. More people who are Democrats say they're liberal. More people who are Republicans say they're conservative than was true just even a few years ago. Those polls, we're a polarized country, and those polls are where the politicians are hunting for votes now.
What is driving that? I mean, because that makes it very difficult to get much done in the country, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in a way it's hard to say. We do see a shift in voters and their concerns. You know, usually what people were worried about was money, jobs, employment. And you can compromise on money fairly easily. I mean, if you want $20, I don't want to give you any. We can split the difference at 10. It's really hard to compromise on these cultural issues, and as we've seen debates swirl around these cultural and social issues, it's a lot easier to portray the other side as wicked, evil, not just, you know, having a disagreement.
We hear that the members of Congress don't socialize as they used to, you know, between the parties. We know that the people probably pick their friends who are more like-minded these days. You agree with that from what you hear?
Well, what we see around the country, not so much in Lexington or maybe Kentucky, but what we see around the country is people are more likely to live in places with folks like them politically. You know, it used to be you could have Republicans and Democrats all down your street, and that is less common in our communities. Not to mention all the social media and the media sources people use. It's getting easier and easier to filter out things that you don't find agreeable and to be in an echo chamber.
You hear what you want to hear.
You hear it many times, and you can unfriend it if you don't hear what you don't want to hear.
The Republicans have their convention this week. They seem to be working to try to broaden Trump's appeal with some of the speakers they have lined up. They've some who've never been in the political arena. The president of the UFC, Dana White, Heisman Trophy winning football player Tim Tebow. Do you think that's what the Republican roster is designed to do, is to try to broaden appeal?
You know, those conventions used to be places where political work got done. More recently, they've become extended advertisements for the ticket, and anything you can get people to watch your ad helps you sell your product as long as you don't mess up. So, you know, having celebrities on the roster makes it more likely people will watch and therefore get the message.
Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who's in his own re-election bid, is not going to the convention. He says he'll be doing some eye surgery during the Senate recess this summer, and he's going to be holding town halls and working his campaign. Ryan Quarles, the ag commissioner in the state, many see him as a rising star within the Kentucky Republican Party, is not going to the convention. He has county fairs, he says, and other events that are going on. Do you read anything into that?
Absolutely. Political parties are a brand. Just like you walk in to buy products in the store and you trust certain brands. That Republican label, the Democratic label, they're brands. And you want people to buy you based on it. Donald Trump poses something of a threat, or maybe to make it sound less negative, threatens to redefine what that brand is. And so any Republican politician right now is in a tough spot. They're trying to decide, how do I trade off showing loyalty to my party versus showing that I don't want my brand to move in the direction Trump is taking it.
Senator Mitch McConnell will be there. He will give a national speech. And Senator Ralph Alvarado, state senator from Winchester, who is a physician, will also speak in basically a primetime role at 9 o'clock on Wednesday night. An interesting choice, and from Kentucky.
Well, it gets him some good publicity, you know, just as established politicians have trouble with the brand being redefined because they're torn between who they are and who the party's kind of pulling them to be. New politicians have an advantage here because if they like where the new brand is going, it gives them an opportunity to latch on to it and rise up with the new party.
How difficult will it be for both of these parties to hold conventions in this tense time in the country and around the world, where there may be protests going on, other things that can be distracting to what they're trying to do?
Well, Bill, you guys in the media love controversy and you love protest. I remember in 1988, the Democratic National Convention, humor columnist Dave Barry put a bag on his head and his couple of friends went with him, and they said they were protesting the lack of anything to protest in 1988. And they got national coverage out of their meaningless protest. It was a big joke. There's lots to protest this year, and I expect that both parties and the cities, you know, that are hosting those conventions are going to have a really difficult time finding that balance between letting people express themselves through protest and not having it descend into the kind of thing that hurts the city and the party.
It's been traditional, as you said, most traditions are gone this year, but usually the opposing candidate is quiet during the convention, but yet this year, Democrat Hillary Clinton has scheduled a major speech in Cincinnati on Monday, the other end of the state of Ohio, a battleground state, where the Republicans will be meeting at that time. Is that a new wrinkle?
Normally, you'd say Hillary Clinton's being rude, but at this stage in the presidential election, I don't know how it's possible to be rude.
And apparently she will name her running mate right after the Republican convention. Is that also an attempt to try to keep the Republicans from getting a bounce?
We know that both parties get a bounce out of their own conventions. Sometimes it's a big one and it doesn't go away quickly. They're more popular for a while. Sometimes that bounce fades very quickly. From a political science perspective, almost always these things wash out by the time you get to the presidential election, but it can work. It can matter in small ways. Do donors feel optimistic? You know, do people sign on quickly and commit their time? It could have some short-term advantages to her to steal their thunder.
Democrat Bernie Sanders endorsed Clinton, but the polls indicate right now a tight Clinton-Trump race, but those polls are all over the board at this point. Any idea why that is?
Usually polls are unstable early on. We see some noise. People flirt with all sorts of possibilities, third-party candidates, switching parties. Almost always, by the time it comes to go into that ballot box and make a decision, people return to the fold. The ones who have voted Democratic in the past, they ultimately come around and they vote for the Democrat. The ones who are Republicans, ultimately they usually vote Republican. If there's any election that could scramble that conventional wisdom, it's this one. A lot of people are unhappy, and they're adding to the instability in the polls as
Any
well.
speculation about her running mate?
Well, I mean, there are lots of different concerns that go into picking a vice presidential choice. You worry about balancing the candidate's personality, somebody who shores up their weaknesses. You worry about regional appeal. You worry about appeal in different groups, such as ethnic appeal or gender. And only one person can't fill all of those different priorities. So ultimately, she'll have to decide what's her highest priority in that running mate and who she's comfortable with having by her side.
How much difficulty does she have with the the situation with the email, the very difficult report that came out from the FBI, but then the decision not to prosecute her?
Well, it looks as though, in the immediate sense, she's suffered whatever she'll suffer from that email controversy. But it does probably mean that when she goes to pick that vice presidential nominee, one of the priorities will be, since she's seen as maybe not so trustworthy by the voting public, to look for somebody with an impeachable public record, someone who's seen as very clean. That would bring a benefit to her ticket.
Dr. Stephen Voss is with us from the University of Kentucky's Political Science Department. In just a moment, Senator Mitch McConnell hoping that the U.S. Senate stays in Republican hands. We'll talk to him about that, Kentucky's own U.S. Senate race, and more on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back in. It's WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers, and we're visiting with Dr. Stephen Voss, who is a political science professor, expert on political behavior from the University of Kentucky. Senator Mitch McConnell hoping to hold on to his role as the Senate Majority Leader, which means the Republicans would have to maintain the majority. This week, former Democratic Indiana Senator Evan Bayh announced he wants to return to Washington. Does that kind of thing change McConnell's calculus?
Well, anytime a tough contender jumps in on the other side, it makes the job harder, right? There's so much money to go around. The more vulnerability you have, the harder it gets. On the other hand, why did he jump in? It's partly because the Democrats see opportunities right now, and that calculus was probably already there for McConnell before that change took place.
He apparently has access to $10 million that he had raised for a 2010 campaign, and then, of course, he dropped out of that race. That is the key advantage, in addition to his own name recognition, right? Yeah. So at this point, is it going to be difficult, do you think, for the Republicans to hold on to the majority and McConnell to his post?
It's always been difficult. I mean,
yeah.
Mitch McConnell's going into the war, with a limited number of troops and a lot of battleground that he needs to cover. Best bet, the Democrats were in a position to take the Senate. If he fights them off at all, even down to one seat, people will be saying what a great job the Senate Republicans did in holding on. If he loses, they'll still throw blame around, but it was an uphill battle from the beginning.
In the Kentucky U.S. Senate race, there's scant polling out there right now, but what we have seen shows a pretty tight race between incumbent Republican Rand Paul and his challenger, the Democrat Jim Gray, the mayor of Lexington. Where is this race headed the next few weeks?
Well, Jim Gray's not a bad candidate, but he faces a difficult situation, difficult context, which is what we were just talking about a second ago. The Democrats have so many opportunities, better ones than Kentucky, really, where they can send their money, where their activists can go, where their attentions are going to be devoted. So it does mean that Gray's going to have to fight this one more on his own than would have been true in a previous year where the pickings were slim for the Dems.
Kentucky Republicans and Democrats battling for control of the state House of Representatives. It has been in Democratic hands since 1921. Will national issues come to play in those local races?
Usually they don't. The cliche is all politics is local, and each one of those contests will be fought between two personalities, or maybe more, but generally two personalities who have their own relationships with the community. But back again to what we were talking about earlier about how polarized people are, more and more people are seeing every contest as a battle between the good guys and the bad guys. And when you see the D, when you see the R, that's having more influence on people than it used to.
Even at the local level?
At every level.
Interesting. There has been a wave of special elections across the state where local communities are passing expanded alcohol sales. There was a time when nearly all of the state, except the major metropolitan areas, were dry. At this point, those localities are making different decisions for the most part.
People tend to think about those anti-drinking laws as being about morality, and there was a period where that's how we debated it, but those things go so far back, and they dealt with problems that are gone in terms of violence among Civil War soldiers after they returned and the like. To me, it's surprising they lasted this long, not surprising that they're starting to fold when you can get revenue from selling. I mean, selling vice, it makes good money.
Do you think it affects one city, that the city next door passed it, and sometimes they think, well, they need to get on board?
Well, that's right. I mean, people are so mobile that even states worry about the effect of their policies compared to the state nearby. When you're talking counties, people shoot across county lines all the time. You're leaving money on the table without much benefit.
Fancy Farm is the traditional kickoff of the campaign in Kentucky. That's coming up here in a couple of weeks or so out in western Kentucky. And then is it after that we will really see these races get in gear here in the Commonwealth?
Usually the campaigns like to wait if they can, because the money spent later has more impact. Voters are paying attention. So yes, unless there's some reason, somebody strategically thinks we need to go really early and break the conventional wisdom, I would look for late moving, yes.
What will you watch for in the conventions the next couple of weeks?
Well, the big challenge are those protests, as I said. What goes on inside the halls is usually pretty scripted, and I'm not sure that we should expect to see a much break from the script. But how do they handle the protests outside? Can the city keep order? What is the party's relationship to the disorder outside? You have to go back in history, but in 1968, the Democratic Party was greatly harmed by protests in Chicago outside their convention hall, and those folks have not forgotten 1968, even if most of us have.
So they'll be working to avoid that situation.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Voss. Appreciate it very much. I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. We'll have, of course, coverage of both conventions on WKYT News and CBS News special reports the evenings of those convention sessions. Thank you for joining us again. We hope you make it a good week ahead. We'll see you bright and early on WKYT this morning. We're up early when you're up.